a place where third-party candidates go to die. It is never easy to put a new political party together. It is never easy for a third-party candidate in the face of our very bifurcated nation to win. If Tucker did this from inside the GOP, I think it would be more powerful for him. But if he wants to sort of blackmail the GOP into saying, I'm going to run a serious third-party effort, align with my goals, or I'm going to go out there and peel off 6, 7, 10% of the voters and see how that works out for you. You know, I think that is a dangerous threat for the GOP. So I think he's in a more powerful position, either doing this as, you know, the blackmailer, the extortionist, to get people in the Republican Party to move toward him, or staying in the influencer lane. Running the traditional campaign is a very long shot, even for somebody with his name ID and his.
So there you have the Lincoln Project and MS Now with, I think, a fever dream of what could be the most helpful thing to the Democrats. That's what you're going to get on MS Now. Is there a civil war taking place in the Republican Party? Or is the Lincoln Project there, Rick Wilson, who just has an absolute disposition of hatred for people on the right? Are they just trying to manifest one? Let's talk to Will Chamberlain. Great to have you back on the show, Will. Senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, at Will Chamberlain. Fresh off of a primary in Florida. Interesting outcomes there, certainly, in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. MS Now goes, how could we break apart the Republican Party? Is there a worry there?
No, I mean, it's all the talk of a civil war, I think, is honestly, I mean, if not put to bed, is seriously in doubt after what we saw in Florida. It's the normal candidates who won, and the kind of crazy Civil War-oriented people like James Fishback and Dan Bilzerian, who went down in flames. And not only that, we did some housekeeping. Corey Mills lost his seat to Ryan Elijah in the 6th District. And so we have a slew of good candidates coming out of there, and I'm really happy about the Florida results. They went about as well as they could have been. And all this talk of civil war, I think this is an online influencer phenomena. It's not reflective of where Republican voters are or how they feel. Republican voters are behind the president and behind the party, and they want to win.
I'm thinking to myself about MS Now spending any time on divisions in the Republican Party. The only place that I personally, and I do see it because I'm professionally on social media quite a lot, I have nobody in my life coming up and going like, but what about Tucker Carlson or anything like that? He's a big deal in this space because I think he's good at being in that space, but I don't think it's a realistic application to the party as a whole. Meanwhile, socialism is having its day on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, the socialists, I think they're doing a little worse than people understand, although they did manage to get their Senate candidate across the line and upset Alex Vindman. That said, I think, Alex Vindman, somebody said in my chat today, I chat with my friends, and they were like, oh, it's too bad it's the socialists beating a moderate, so I guess that's not great in the grand scheme of things. And I'm like, no, Alex Vindman is a traitor. And a chow thief. So I think I'm perfectly happy to see him beat by a socialist. I don't see how that's an improvement. I think Alex Vindman should be in Fort Leavenworth, so it's good that he's not in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, and in Florida, okay, you're going to run a socialist candidate up against the now red state of Florida. I think that for Republicans, that race going the way it did was about the best outcome possible.
Yeah, that's going to be a buzzsaw. A number of races that could have created vulnerabilities. That Corey Mills race could have been a problem because his personal issues are just outrageous. So that could have been a problem. That's not going to be anymore because we kicked him out in the primary. We didn't have all of our, the Trump endorsed candidates everywhere else run. In fact, the funny thing is you look at Trump's comments today about Corey Mills, you get the sense that he kind of didn't really want to endorse Corey Mills. Maybe he felt like he had to for reasons of how thin the House majority was, and he couldn't endorse against that many incumbents. But he's happy to see him go. We've got good candidates up and down the ballot. We're winning. And Florida is looking really good, and we're not going to have to spend any money in Florida to keep the enormous Republican majority we have there.
Florida's a big state. I mean, it's a very populous state. There are a lot of votes to count in Florida, and they count them fast. Why is it that in Florida they can implement that type of an election result production where the people of Florida know what the result is and they know it quickly and they seem to rely on it, and California takes weeks? Is it intentional?
Yeah, that's intentional. I mean, they did a lot of work to figure out how to do that and how to basically make it invulnerable to fraud. Like, I lived in Florida, I voted in Florida. You show ID at the polling place, and you have a paper ballot, and then you put that paper ballot in a feed. And so obviously there's that's going to a statewide repository. And so literally my understanding is the state of Florida, somebody in the governor's office or somebody in the state of Secretary of State's office pushes a button, and then you have all the results from all the polling places, voila, like that. And I'm not sure, not maybe at least in counties, maybe that's divided by county, I don't know. But basically this is, you just don't get the stuff where you have days and days and days of counting ballots. Like the vast majority of votes get counted immediately, and then you've got some lingering, some outliers from like absentee voting and whatever that might, they might have to do some late counting on, but it's a trivial portion. And so as a result, we get results immediately. And I mean, we have to go back all the way to the 2000 election when George Bush and Al Gore fought it out, and the hanging chads, and their Broward County was a mess. And I think the state of Florida, to its credit, decided we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to be the embarrassment of the country. We're going to be leading the way on election integrity.
Well, let's talk about the embarrassment to the country. I'm going to put California out there. You might raise me a different state that I'm not paying as much attention to, but that's the big one that gets the most attention for being abysmal. I mean, is that part intentional? Are they making the process string out so much for a reason?
Yeah, I think they are, honestly. I think that, election integrity in California is a joke. You have video of, obviously it takes a month to count election results. They're an outlier in the entire Western world, not just in the United States. In the entire Western world, there's nowhere else that counts ballots the way California does. And they, have vote by mail and low integrity vote by mail. Lots of people registered homeless shelters, which is just a really good way to ensure that people vote who have no intention of voting. I'm sorry. Like, it's almost de facto evidence of fraud. If you are registering like hard drug addicts who are homeless via vote by mail, you are just obviously trying to do fraud, because why on earth, if you were sitting there as a vote register, you're thinking to yourself, well, if I'm going to get this guy to register to vote, I need them to show up and do this, show up, be so of sound mind to remember 2 months from now on election day to fill out a ballot. And if this election was on the level, then why would you waste time trying to do that with homeless drug addicts? Because you couldn't count on them to do that. But since it's not on a level, because the whole idea here is you're going to hope that somebody else will be able to vote those ballots for the homeless person who knows where they will be in 2 months, right? So it's just de facto fraud.
So we're speaking with Will Chamberlain right now, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. Going back to that discussion about the strength of the Republican Party going into these midterm elections here in November, there's a lot to be said about, you've got a majority in the Senate right now of Republicans, a majority in the House, of course, President Trump in the White House. Why can't we get done what we need to get done right now with the Republicans that we have in there? And can anything get done in the final 2 years, at least congressionally, if we lose one of those chambers?
I mean, right now, basically, you'll have nothing done in the next 2 years. I mean, it's really important the Republicans get out and vote. I know it can feel frustrating, but I think people need to take a step back, take a broader view, and look at what the administration has managed to do in the last 2 years. It's a lot. On immigration, we have, fought tooth and nail to win these legal battles, and now all temporary protected status is over. Refugee admissions are gone, except from South Africa. The only place there's refugees are coming in is from South Africa now. The new statistics showed that. Remember, the border, we shut down the border. Border crossings are at an all-time low. Crime is at a massive all-time low, or at least a low in like the last 30 or 40 years. It's a remarkable performance, and the economy's humming. The stock market's way up. We have some, cost inflation issues, but that's because President Trump thought it was wise to go into Iran, which I agree with, actually. And for all the talk of how we're losing that war, it turns out that we're getting all the oil we need to get out of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran can't really do much about it, to the point that we're now saying we don't have any negotiations. We're just maintaining a naval blockade. Like, we're winning in a lot of different ways, I think, and especially as we get closer and closer to the election and we start, kind of presenting the case and making everybody remember, like, this is what it was like under Biden. Honestly, do you really think you're worse off than you were 2 years ago? I don't think so. Yeah. I think most Americans are better off, and I think it's going to be a pretty compelling pitch.
I'm glad you brought up Iran, because it does have it's a very simple, first and only headline that people who want to criticize the president, who would do that on any day, this one makes it a little simpler for them. They call him a war president, so on and so forth. Politics is PR in many cases. It's not policy. How much of what you believe, the average American, not the Politico junkie that like you and I might be, how much of what the average American believes to be true right now is based on political spin by people who just want to see Trump fail, even at the cost of America succeeding?
A decent amount. I think a lot of people are kind of tuned out on this, and in the sense of, just not wanting a war. It's like, okay, that's a reasonable place to be, but I think you're gonna. Somebody posted on X a very interesting point. He's like, there aren't anti-war protests in the streets of DC. Why are there not anti-war protests? Well, there really aren't very many Americans dying. I mean, we lost something like 16 Americans, which obviously every death, obviously tragedy of a service member. But in the context of the normal military operations, like this is the number of people who would die even if we weren't in a war, right? From just the number of people who would die from training accidents or, random attacks from just having our forces in the region. So, and right now, like they're not able to go after our guys. Our guys are on ships thousands of miles away from Iran. We don't have troops on the ground. So what is the anti-war? It's not like other wars where we've had this massive anti-war movement that felt organic and could get people motivated. I don't see that, and I don't see it happening, because what are you going to do? You're going to get motivated. Is the left going to get out there and start protesting about how high oil prices are? That's sort of counterintuitive for them, because they want to eliminate oil consumption in any event because they think it causes global warming. So there's just not without troops on the ground actually dying, and with all that happening just being basically a naval blockade and an economic sanction regime with intermittent airstrikes on military facilities, like there's just nothing to get mad at, nothing to keep people really angry and engaged. So I think it just won't be that salient a factor for people when it comes time to vote in the fall. And the other point I would make here is everybody's talking about these polling, and we look really bad in polls right now. Okay, but then you see these the actual election results in the primaries, and they're like 20 points off in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, and elsewhere. Like just now, we had this Vindman thing where Vindman got knocked down. Another 15 to 20 point miss. I don't think the pollsters have a really good handle on the electorate right now. And when I see these numbers like Tallarico up in Texas, just from these, I'm like, really? We won Texas by 15. Are things that much worse? Do we lose 20% of the public because of like a naval blockade in Iran? I don't think so.
Yeah. Are those intentionally wrong? You think those polls are intentional? Maybe they're not making mistakes. Maybe they're trying to accomplish something?
I think the way that polling works is they call you on your phone from unknown numbers, and who in their right mind picks that up? You're just getting a very weird self-selected part of the electorate. And I think Ryan Gerdusky had a good podcast where he talked about, in particular, like older white voters, the kind of people who respond to those polls, they tend to be left-leaning because they really want to tell you about their politics, which is just like the most older white left liberal thing. It's just really, really, really wanting to tell you about how good and noble they are because they're liberals. And it's just like older right-wing white voters don't vote that way. And so, they do the way they do these polls, obviously they get everybody's demographic information and then try and take the results and map them onto the demographics, and then they spit it out. Well, if they're saying white voters are suddenly really favoring Democrats, and it's because right-leaning Republican voters who are white aren't responding to the poll, you just get wild errors.
Yeah. Well, I like your optimism and your realism more than anything, Will Chamberlain. It'll be interesting to see how the Republican Party navigates a few big tent concerns, and the big tent is the number one. It's weird that big tent for Democrats is like, sure, socialism. That sounds fine. We'll take it. That's the option that they have on the table.
They got a much bigger problem. If you're talking about a civil war, the DSA Democrat civil war, that's a much bigger problem. I mean, basically, our fringe is just much more marginal.
Yeah, amen to that. Will Chamberlain, great to see you again and talk to you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, we'll do it again. Will Chamberlain.